Michael Lewandowski's world stopped at the exact moment he opened the bedroom door. What he saw made his heart stop beating for a few seconds. On the large bed, in bedding still warm from sleep, lay his two 3-month-old sons, Jakub and Philip, wrapped in blankets, their eyes wide open, completely motionless, as if trapped in a silence that no one could break. Next to them on the floor was Anna Novak, the woman hired to clean the house. Her hands were tied with a thick brown rope, and her face was pale as chalk. "Mr. Lewandowski, I tried to protect them," she whispered in a trembling, hoarse voice, tears streaming down her cheeks. But her words echoed in the dead silence. The most disturbing thing was that the children were not crying. No whimpering, no sound, only silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. Why were they so calm? Why did their eyes seem so empty? What had really happened in this house? When Machau was on a business trip in Gdańsk, the man felt his legs give way beneath him. He took a step back, as if the ground beneath him was about to open up. His whole world, built on trust, loyalty, and apparent security, began to shake. This bedroom, lit by the soft light of a night lamp, hid a secret that would destroy everything he took for granted. And what he was about to discover would change not only his life, but also the fate of everyone who was part of this family. Before we continue with this incredible story, write in the comments which city you are watching us from. We'd love to know where our wonderful viewers are from. Rain was hitting the windows of the black Mercedes as Michał Lewandowski drove through the deserted streets of Krakow. It had been 3 weeks since he last saw his sons. 3 weeks of non-stop meetings in Warsaw, million-dollar contracts, and sleepless nights in cold, soulless hotel rooms. He was 42 years old and had built a powerful empire in the real estate industry. But each new success only deepened the void left by the death of his wife Magdalena, who had passed away just 3 months earlier on the day she gave birth to their twins. A hemorrhage that the doctors were unable to control. When his villa appeared on the horizon, monumental with white columns and gardens trimmed as if with a ruler, Michał felt a familiar tightness in his chest. This house, worth over PLN 10 million, was Magdalena's dream come true. Now, however, it had become nothing more than a mausoleum of memories, cold and silent, like the marble from which it was built. He parked in the semicircular driveway. He noticed that all the lights were off except for those in one room upstairs. He glanced at his watch. It was 6:30 p.m., the time when Anna Novak, the woman hired to look after the children, usually prepared bottles for Philip and Jakub. He unlocked the door and slipped inside. A dark leather suitcase fell to the floor in the hall. "Anna, boys, Dad's home," he called out with a slight smile, trying to give himself courage. He knew that 3-month-old babies wouldn't answer, but he expected at least some crying, some sound. Nothing. A thick, sticky silence, as if the house had held its breath. With each passing second, his heart beat faster. His parental instinct kicked in immediately, pushing him toward the white marble stairs. He ran up them almost at a sprint, 2 steps at a time, sensing that something was very wrong. When he reached the top, he headed straight for the master bedroom, the same one he had once shared with Magdalena, but which he had avoided since her death, preferring to fall asleep in his study among the papers and the smell of coffee rather than among memories. The door was ajar. Michał pushed it open slowly, and then the world ceased to exist. His sons, Philip and Jakub, were lying on the huge bed. Their tiny bodies were wrapped in soft but tight fabrics, as if someone wanted to immobilize them. Their tiny hands were gently but clearly bound. The worst thing, however, was their gaze. Their eyes were wide open, frozen, without tears, without screams, as if they were looking at something that no one else could see. And next to them was Anna Novak, also tied up. Her hands were immobilized, her head fell to one side, her hair stuck to her face with sweat and tears. The woman Michał had hired 2 months earlier to help him after the tragedy. The woman he trusted without hesitation. "Mr. Lewandowski," Anna Novak shouted as soon as she saw him. Her voice was hoarse, broken with emotion. Her pink apron, her everyday uniform, was torn on the shoulder. There was a purple bruise on her cheek, and her eyes, swollen from crying, shone with pure despair. "God, finally. I tried to protect them. I did everything I could," she gasped, almost staggering. Michał rushed towards the children. His hands were shaking so much that he could barely untie the fabric they were wrapped in. What the hell happened here, Jakob? Philip, Dad's here. He whispered and called out at the same time, desperately searching their eyes for signs of life. The boys moved slowly, unnaturally, as if they were still stuck in some kind of nightmare. Finally, he managed to free them and press them tightly to his chest. He could feel their tiny hearts beating wildly in rhythm with pure fear. "They came in this morning," Anna said in a trembling voice, as Michael untangled her wrists. "There were 3 of them. They wore black masks. They attacked me while I was preparing the morning milk. One overpowered me, the other 2 took the children from their cribs. They carried them to the bedroom and poured something into their bottles, something that made them so calm, so unnaturally quiet." Mikhail felt something break inside him. "Did you call the police?" "The ambulance." The woman shook her head in despair. "I couldn't. They tied me up. The phone was in the kitchen. They also cut the landline." Her words came out in a chaotic stream as she rubbed her sore red wrists. Mikhail grabbed his phone and dialed 112. While waiting for the call to connect, he looked at Anna. There was more than fear in her eyes, a shadow he couldn't name. The children were drugged, but not taken. Nothing had been stolen either. And yet the house was full of valuable things. Nothing made sense. "Hello, police. I want to report a robbery and attempted poisoning. My newborns have been drugged," he said in a calm but icy voice. And yet his gaze remained fixed on Anna, the woman he had hired just 2 months earlier when he couldn't cope with single fatherhood. The woman who knew every corner of this villa. And then, hugging the still, dazed boys in his arms, Michael realized something terrifying. Perhaps the danger had never left this house. The ambulance arrived after 12 minutes, followed by 2 police cars, whose blue lights illuminated the driveway like a scene from a movie. Mikhail sat in the living room on a gray velour armchair, hugging Philip and Jakub, who were still too calm. On the other side of the room sat Anna, wrapped in a blanket handed to her by the paramedic. She was still trembling. "Mr. Lewandowski," began Inspector Pyotr Kulesha, a man in his 50s with graying hair and a look that had seen too much. "Please describe exactly what you found when you returned home." Mikhail took a deep breath, trying to speak calmly, though his voice was trembling. "I arrived around 6:30 p.m. The house was unnaturally quiet. I went upstairs and found all 3 of them tied up in the master bedroom. The children seemed to be asleep. They weren't crying, they weren't responding. It was a nightmare." The paramedic who examined the boys approached with a serious expression. "We did some preliminary tests. It appears that the children had been exposed to benzodiazepines, probably administered in their milk. The dosage is not lethal, but sufficient to cause drowsiness and confusion. We recommend hospitalization to monitor their condition." Mikhail's blood ran cold. Someone had drugged his children in his own home under the watchful eye of a woman he trusted. He turned to Anna, who was now sitting with her head down, while the paramedic applied ice to her cheek. "Mrs. Nowak," Inspector Kulesha said, pulling out his notebook, "please describe the attackers." "There were 3 of them. All dressed in black with ski masks, they broke in through the back door, the one from the garden. Around 9 o'clock a.m., I was preparing bottles when they attacked me." "The door was locked?" asked Kulesha. Anna hesitated. The moment hung in the air like a blade. "I think so. I always check the locks in the evening, but in the morning I open the window to air out the kitchen. Maybe I didn't turn the key then. So it could have been open?" The inspector made a note. "What happened next?" "One of them covered my mouth, another held my hands. The third went upstairs where the children were sleeping. He took them, brought them here, and gave them milk. I saw him pour white powder into the bottle. The children drank calmly as always, and then they just fell silent, without tears, without a sound. It was terrifying." Michael clenched his fists, gently rocking the twins, who finally began to move a little more lively in his arms. "And then, they tied you all together?" he asked. His voice broke between anger and fear. Anna nodded, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "Yes. They dragged me into the bedroom and tied me up next to the boys. They were wrapped in soft bands, as if they didn't want to hurt them, just prevent them from moving. And then they just stood there. They looked at us for a long time. They didn't say a word. They didn't take anything. They just stared as if they were waiting for something or someone. Inspector Kulesa looked up from his notebook. Someone. Do you think they were waiting for Mr. Lewandowski? I don't know, Anna replied tremulously. After about an hour, maybe less, they just left as suddenly as they had appeared. One of them looked me straight in the eye and said only, "Keep quiet and nothing will happen to you." And they left the same way they came. Mikhail stood up abruptly, pressing the children tightly to his chest. This doesn't add up. 3 people enter my house, drug my newborns, tie everyone up. They sit here for an hour and leave. No ransom, no theft, no word. What did they want? I understand your emotions, Mr. Lewandowski, replied the inspector calmly, with the tone of a man who had seen many illogical tragedies. But these are the facts. My people are checking the garden gate for fingerprints or day traces. Mikhail looked at Anna, observing every detail of her face. The bruise was real, as were the marks left by the ropes on her wrists. The tears looked genuine, and yet something in her eyes bothered him. Something he couldn't put his finger on. A woman who had known every nook and cranny of the house for 2 months, his daily routine, the times he left, even the location of the cameras. Cameras? He said suddenly, jumping up. I have 6 cameras around the property. They must have recorded it. Kulesa shook his head with a heavy sigh. We already checked that. The system was turned off at 8:45 a.m. Someone knew the access code. Silence fell, thick as fog. Mikhail felt something tighten in his stomach. He looked at Anna, whose face suddenly turned pale. Only 3 people know this code, he said quietly with dangerous calm. Me, my niece Kasia, and you, Anna. In the days that followed, the Lewandowski villa turned into a prison of suspicion. The police completed their preliminary investigation, but found no signs of a break-in, no fingerprints, no DNA, no footprints, as if the 3 attackers were ghosts. Philip and Jakub returned from the hospital after a day of observation. However, their behavior had changed. They became restless. They cried every time Anna left the room, as if they only felt safe with her. This surprised Mikhail, but it did not escape the attention of Rafał Kroll, his driver and former family friend. Mr. Lewandowski, Rafał said one morning as he drove through the center of Krakow. The neat man with smoothly combed hair and a cold, glassy gaze glanced at his boss in the mirror. I don't want to interfere, but I've noticed that Anna has access to practically everything. She knows the codes. She knows where you keep your spare keys. She even knows the combination to the safe in your office. Mikhail, engrossed in reading an email on his tablet, looked up. What are you getting at, Rafał? Nothing, Mr. Mikhail, he replied with an innocent smile. But if someone wanted to stage a break-in, they would need an accomplice on the inside. Someone who knows every detail of your home and your routine. Mikhail felt tension tighten his neck. Anna has been working here for 2 months. I hired her when I was on the verge of a breakdown after Magda's death. She hasn't done anything to arouse suspicion. Of course I understand, replied Rafał with a smile that sounded more like a warning than agreement. I'm just wondering one thing. Why was the camera system turned off exactly 15 minutes before the attack? As if someone wanted it to look natural. And why didn't the intruders take anything? Your watch collection, worth 500,000 zlotys, is in plain sight. Rafał's words hung in the air like smoke. Mikhail didn't answer, but his thoughts began to revolve around suspicions he had previously dismissed. Was it possible? Could Anna have planned out everything? And if so, for what purpose? That same evening, as Mikhail sat in his study poring over documents, the doorbell rang. He looked at the intercom screen. Ewa Wysoka, a neighbor from the villa next door, was standing at the gate. A woman in her 50s, known for knowing everything about everyone. Mr. Mikhail, dear, she said with exaggerated concern when he opened the door. The scent of her perfume with a hint of gardenia wafted from the hallway. Dressed in a pink suit and covered in jewelry, she looked like someone who never came empty-handed or empty-headed. I had to talk to you. I'm worried about you and those little boys. Miss Ewa, this is really a bad time. He replied in a tired tone, I know, but it's important. She looked around nervously, as if someone might be eavesdropping on them. I saw Anna 3 days before all this. She was in your garden, talking on the phone. She was very upset. She kept repeating something like, it will be the right moment and there will be no problem. At the time, I thought it was a private conversation, but now, after what happened, Mikhail froze. Are you suggesting that Anna was involved? Ewa raised her hands dramatically. No, no, God forbid. I'm just saying what I heard. But admit it, isn't it strange that a simple cleaning lady is so devoted? She spends more time in this house than you do, always with the children, as if she were waiting for something. Before Makau could answer, Anna Novak appeared at the top of the stairs. She was holding Philip and Jakub, one on each side. The boys were sleeping peacefully, snuggled up to her, as if they only felt safe with her. This sight made Mikhail feel even more confused. How was it possible that his children were so calm in the arms of a woman he increasingly suspected of betrayal? Mrs. Wysoka, Anna said coolly, I didn't know you were here. It was just a friendly visit. Ewa replied with a smile that lacked warmth. But I'll be going now. Mikhail dear, if you need anything, I'm right next door. She gave Anna one last meaningful look before leaving behind the scent of gardenias and a trail of suspicion. Mikhail didn't sleep a wink that night. He sat in his study with a glass of whiskey, watching the security system monitors. The screen showed every corner of the estate. An hour earlier, Anna had put the twins to bed, singing them a quiet lullaby. The same one she had once mentioned her mother singing to her when she was a child. The boys fell asleep peacefully. Their tiny chests rose and fell rhythmically in the arms of a woman who was perhaps capable of the most cruel betrayal. The phone on the desk vibrated. A message from Rafał. Mr. Mikhail, I found something you should see. Can we talk in the morning? Mikhail stared at the screen for a long time before replying with a short yes. And when silence fell in the villa and darkness covered the corridors, only one thought circled in Mikhail's head. Could it be the woman to whom he had entrusted the lives of his children? The woman who was supposed to be his support after Magda's death was his most dangerous enemy. The next morning, a red Alfa Romeo pulled into the driveway with a screech of tires. Mikhail recognized the car immediately. It belonged to his niece, Kasia Lewandowska, the daughter of his late brother. The 22-year-old law student from Warsaw had returned to Krakow without warning. Kasia got out of the car with her usual energy. Her hair was tied back in a ponytail. She was wearing a black leather jacket and ripped jeans, and she had the same green sparkle in her eyes that her mother had. With a bright pink suitcase in her hand, she rushed inside the moment Mikhail opened the door. Uncle Mikhail, she shouted, throwing her arms around his neck. I heard what happened. Why didn't you tell me right away? I didn't want to worry you during your exams, he replied calmly, returning her embrace with a delay. Kasia had a talent for showing up just when life was spiraling out of control. Exams can wait, family can't, she replied, throwing her jacket on the sofa and rushing towards the stairs. Where are the boys? How are they? With Anna in the nursery, Mikhail replied, watching his niece's face light up at these words. Anna is still here. Thank God, she exclaimed, running up the stairs, and he followed Ikra. Through the half-open door, they saw Anna sitting in an armchair with the twins nestled in her arms. She was quietly humming a lullaby, and the children were sleeping peacefully. The scene was so peaceful that it was hard to believe that 4 days ago the same woman had been found tied up with them. Kasia rushed into the room and hugged Anna so tightly that the woman could barely hold the children. Anna, God, it's so good to see you. It must have been terrible. Anna returned the hug, her eyes filled with tears. Kasia, I didn't even know you were back. I came as soon as I found out. Her niece replied, kneeling next to the armchair and gently stroking the sleeping Philip's head. I'm not leaving here until we find the culprits. No one will hurt my family and get away with it. Mikhail stood in the doorway with his arms crossed. There had always been a strange bond between his niece and Anna. It was as if they had known each other for a long time, as if they were connected by something more than just a chance meeting 2 months ago. That evening during dinner, the tension in the house reached a boiling point. Rafał asked for a private conversation with Mikhail, but Kasia insisted on participating. They sat down in the study by the crackling fire in the fireplace. Rafał placed a brown briefcase on the desk. Mr. Mikhail, he began, glancing cautiously at Kasia. I have gathered information about Anna Novak's past, as you requested. Uncle, what does this mean? Kasia snapped. Are you following a woman who has been caring for your children as her own for 2 months? It's just a precaution, Kasia. Mikhail replied coolly. Rafał continued. The driver took a stack of documents out of the briefcase. Anna Novak, 35, born in Gdynia, moved to Krakow 3 years ago, shortly after her husband Marek Novak disappeared without a trace. He vanished. Maikao repeated. Yes, he was the financial director of the trading company Baltimex. The company went bankrupt under rather unclear circumstances. How unclear? Mikao asked, leaning over the desk. There was accounting manipulation at the company. Someone diverted funds. When the matter came to light, the company collapsed, and Marek was one of the main suspects. However, he did not make it to court. He disappeared 3 days before the hearing. Kaja jumped up from her seat. Her face was red with anger. So what? That's not proof of guilt. Anna was a victim, not an accomplice. Rafael raised his eyebrows and continued. The company that took over Baltimex's assets after its collapse belonged to a capital group. He looked at Mikau, pausing. Lenke Development, one of your subsidiaries. There was a silence so thick that all you could hear was the crackling of the flames in the fireplace. Mikau turned pale. Kasia looked at him as if she were seeing a stranger for the first time. Uncle, tell me it's not true, she whispered. You're not going to tell me that it was your company that destroyed her family's life. I didn't know, he replied. His voice broke. I manage dozens of companies. I can't control every decision. But it was your company that took everything from them, Keisha shouted. Her husband disappeared. She was left with debts, and you hired her without knowing that you were the cause of her downfall. Rafael spoke quietly, but his words cut through the silence like a knife. What if, Miss Kasia, that's why Anna came here? Maybe she knew who Mr. Lewandowski was from the very beginning. Maybe she had a plan. Enough, Kasia shouted, slamming her hand on the desk so hard that both men flinched. Anna is the most honest and selfless person I know. When Aunt Magda died in childbirth, when you were a wreck and couldn't even hold the children in your arms, she was the one who saved you. She was the one who got up every night, fed them, changed their diapers, and cuddled them when they cried for hours. Kasia's words hit Michal like blows. He knew she was right, and that hurt the most. Kasia, I understand your loyalty to Anna, he said quietly but firmly. But you have to look at the facts. The attackers knew the alarm codes. They knew when I would be away. They didn't steal anything. And now we find out that Anna had a reason to hate me. The girl looked at him with disappointment in her eyes. The fact is, Uncle, that Anna loves those boys more than you can imagine. If she wanted revenge, she wouldn't spend every minute protecting them. That's not what hatred looks like. It was 3 a.m. when Michael came downstairs, unable to sleep. Thoughts swirled in his head like a storm at sea. Anna's past, her husband's disappearance, the collapse of Baltimex, and his own corporation's possible involvement in all of it. Everything was starting to fit together like a puzzle, but he still didn't understand the meaning. He stopped at the kitchen door. The light was on. Anna was sitting at the large marble table. A cup of tea was steaming in front of her. Her hair was loose, her shoulders wrapped in a gray bathrobe. When she lifted her head, he saw her eyes, swollen, red, as if she had been crying for a long time. Mr. Lewandowski, she said quietly. I couldn't sleep. Me neither, he replied, remaining in the doorway for a moment. He didn't know whether to sit down or leave. In the end, fatigue won out. He took a seat opposite her. A heavy silence hung between them, full of words that neither of them could utter. You already know, don't you? She asked suddenly, squeezing the mug so hard that her knuckles turned white. You know about Marek and Baltimex? Michael nodded. Rafael figured it all out. Anna snorted bitterly, without a trace of a smile. Of course, he doesn't trust anyone. She took a sip of tea, her hands trembling. You want to know the truth? I'll tell you everything. You don't have to pay more detectives to dig into my life. Michael waited silently. The woman took a deep breath, like someone about to jump into icy water. Marek was brilliant, perhaps too brilliant. When he got the job at Baltimex, he was happy. He said he was finally working in a place where his knowledge was appreciated. But after a few months, he began to notice discrepancies, nonsensical transfers, funds that disappeared and appeared out of nowhere. When he tried to talk to his superiors about it, they told him to keep quiet. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she didn't try to wipe them away. He couldn't keep quiet. He started taking notes and copying documents. I remember that evening he came home pale as a ghost. He told me he had discovered something huge, something that went beyond Baltimex itself. Someone was using the company as a cover for money laundering. Mikhail felt a shiver. And what happened next? Then everything collapsed. Suddenly, bankruptcy was announced. The newspapers wrote about fraud and disappearing funds. Marek was found guilty, even though he swore that someone had framed him. 3 days before the hearing, he left the house with a briefcase full of evidence. He was supposed to tell me the whole truth that evening. He never came back. Her voice trembled. Then she raised her tone, unable to control her emotions. Marek would never have left me. Never. Then she covered her mouth with her hand so as not to wake the children. The police found nothing. Mikhail asked quietly. I reported him missing. I did everything I could. No traces, no body, no money in his account. As if he had vanished into thin air. And I was left with the company's debts, which collapsed on me like an avalanche. I lost my house, my savings, everything. Mikhail rubbed his face with his hand, trying to collect his thoughts. And when did you find out that my company had taken over Baltimex's assets? Anna turned away, looking out the window. As she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. 2.5 years ago, I was working odd jobs, cleaning, waitressing, babysitting. One day, I saw an article in Gazeta Gospodarcha about the acquisition of Baltimex's assets by a company with your name, Mikhail Lewandowski. She paused, then corrected herself. Mikhail Lewandowski, president of LNK Development, the man who profited from the collapse of the company that destroyed my life. She turned toward him. There was pain in her eyes, but also something darker. Anger she could no longer hide. Do you know what I thought then? He is to blame for everything. Because of him, Marek disappeared. Because of him, I've lost everything. For months, I dreamed of revenge. I wanted you to suffer like I did. Mikhail felt his heart beat faster. This was the confession he had feared. And then, he asked slowly, and then, 2 months ago, I saw an ad, Anna began, staring quietly into the void. They were looking for someone to take care of 2 newborns after their mother died in childbirth. I don't know why, but something pushed me to send an application. Maybe I wanted to see the monster up close. She sat back down at the table and hid her face in her hands. But when I saw Philip and Jakob, the little ones who had just lost their mother, who cried for hours at night, and you, Mr. Lewandowski, a completely broken man who didn't even know how to hold his children in his arms. That's when everything changed. Tears streamed down her cheeks, dripping onto the tabletop. I realized that you are not a monster. You are just a father who has lost everything. And these children, these wonderful defenseless little ones, did not deserve to have another loved one taken away from them by my hatred. Mikhail felt something tighten in his throat. So you gave up your revenge? It wasn't giving up, she replied, looking up. It was a choice. I chose love for these children over hatred for their father, because wherever Marek is, he would never want me to turn into someone full of anger. Silence fell in the kitchen, not like before, heavy and stifling, but gentle, full of understanding. Mikhail looked at the woman across the table, and for the first time he did not see an enemy, but someone who had suffered as deeply as he had. Anna, he finally said in a trembling voice, I'm sorry. For Mark, for everything. You couldn't have known, she replied gently. The question is, can you accept that I once hated you? Mikhail nodded. Everyone deserves a second chance. But as he spoke these words, an icy thought crossed his mind. What if someone else hadn't given up on revenge? The next day, he woke up with an uneasy feeling. The conversation with Anna had explained a lot, but it had also raised even more questions. If she really had let it go, who had organized the attack? And why? At 9:00 a.m., Rafael knocked on the office door. His face had the same expression that Mikhail knew all too well. The expression of a man who had just found something that could turn the situation to his advantage. Mr. Lewandowski. He began by closing the door with exaggerated caution. He placed a black leather briefcase on the desk, but did not open it right away. Instead, he sat down opposite Mikhail, nonchalantly crossing his legs. We need to have a serious talk. I'm listening. Mikhail replied calmly, leaning back in his chair. Rafael opened the briefcase with theatrical solemnity. Inside were documents, photos, and bank statements. As you know, after our conversation yesterday, I continued my search for information about Anna Novak and found some interesting things. Mikhail felt a tightening in his stomach. What things? Documents that clearly link LNK Development to the collapse of Baltimex. But that's not all. He pulled out a photograph and slid it across the desk. It showed Marek Novak, a smiling man in his 40s wearing glasses, standing next to another man whom Mikhail immediately recognized. God, he muttered. It's Sergius Ratajczak. Exactly, Rafael confirmed with a hint of triumph. Ratajczak and Novak were very close friends. And now guess who was behind the financial manipulation at Baltimex? Mikhail froze. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place in a picture he didn't want to see. Sergius was using Baltimex to launder money he stole from my company, he said quietly. Bravo, Rafael muttered. And when you discovered his scams and fired him, he brought Baltimex down to cover his tracks. And Marek Novak was just a scapegoat. Before he could reveal anything, he disappeared. Michał looked at him grimly. He disappeared. Was he silenced? Rafael shrugged. We don't know, but that's not the end of it. The most interesting thing is that Anna may have no idea about this. Or on the contrary, she may know all too well. Maybe the whole break-in was just the first stage of her plan for revenge. Michał didn't immediately deny it. I talked to her that night. Anna has stopped thinking about revenge. She loves my children. Rafael smiled indulgently. Mr. Michael, you are a brilliant businessman, but when it comes to people, you can be naive. Tears, emotions, sacrifice. It may be the best mask she could have chosen. I have no proof of her guilt, Michał said, feeling a sense of helplessness growing inside him. But I have proof of your guilt, Rafael replied calmly, tapping his finger on the briefcase. These documents prove that your company profited from the Novak family's tragedy. If they were leaked to the media, the tax authorities, or, God forbid, to Anna herself, you would be finished. Lenke development would collapse in a single day. Michał remained silent. He knew it wasn't a threat, it was a promise. Well, how much do you want? He finally asked flatly. Rafael's smile widened. 2 million euros is a fair price for my discretion. You're blackmailing me. I call it mutual security, he replied lightly. You keep your reputation. I'm getting fair compensation for years of loyal service. A pittance for a man like you. Michał was seething inside, but his face remained stony. What if I refuse? Rafael stood up, taking his briefcase, and then tomorrow morning copies of these documents will go to the press, the prosecutor's office, and Anna. By evening, you will be a symbol of greed, and she will be the victim you destroyed. Bastard. Entrepreneur. Rafael corrected him with an ironic bow. I learned from the best. You have 48 hours, and don't try to play the hero. I have backup. If anything happens to me, the documents will be leaked anyway. When the door closed, Michał was left alone in the dim light of the office. He rested his elbows on the desk and hid his face in his hands. He was trapped. If he paid, Rafael would keep him on a leash for the rest of his life. If he didn't pay, he would lose everything. His phone vibrated, a message from an unknown number. Look out the window. He walked over to the panoramic window overlooking the driveway. Next to Rafael's car was a black Mercedes with tinted windows. The rear window slowly lowered a few centimeters. Enough for Michał to see a man in sunglasses who raised his hand in a mocking gesture of greeting. After a moment, the window slid up and the car drove off into the night. A new message. Rafael is not working alone. You have more enemies than you think. Michał Lewandowski's blood ran cold. He wasn't just a victim of Rafael's blackmail. Someone else was behind it all. Someone who pulled the strings in the shadows, who knew every detail of his life, who knew where to strike because he knew him all too well. He ran down the stairs, crossed the living room, and went out into the garden. There, Anna was slowly pushing a double stroller in which Philip and Jakob were sleeping peacefully. When she saw him, she smiled, but the smile immediately disappeared at the sight of his grim face. Mr. Lewandowski, what's going on? Michał stopped in front of her, staring at her intently, as if trying to see under her skin. He was looking for falsehood, deceit, guilt, but all he saw was sincere concern. Anna, he said slowly, his voice tense as a wire. I need to know the truth. Is there anyone else? Someone who knows your history with Mark? Someone who could use it against me? The woman's face paled. There's something I haven't told you. She didn't have time to finish. Kasia ran out of the house, holding her phone, her eyes wide with fear. Uncle, you have to see this. It's everywhere. Mikhail grabbed the device. The screen lit up with an article with a headline that hit him like a punch. A millionaire from Krakow linked to a financial scandal and a mysterious disappearance. The woman who works for him is the widow of the victim. The world began to collapse. 3 hours later, the Lewandowski's villa looked like a besieged fortress. Broadcast trucks stood in front of the gate, reporters with microphones and cameras pressed against the iron fence, and the hashtag Justice4 mark was trending online. Every screen showed Mikhail's face next to a photo of Anna, now portrayed as a heroic widow who had forgiven the man responsible for the tragedy of her life. How do they know all this so quickly? Mikhail shouted, pacing around the office like a caged animal. Kasia sat on the couch answering phone call after phone call. This article contains details that only a few people knew about. You need to calm down, she said, even though she herself was pale as a ghost. We need to prepare a statement. The press office is drowning in questions. Anna sat quietly in the corner of the room. Her face was expressionless, white as paper. Upstairs, the twins slept peacefully, watched over by the new nanny that Kasia had hired in a hurry. Mikhail's phone rang. The name of Dr. Julian Ferry, his lawyer, appeared on the screen. Mikhail, we have a disaster, the man began. LNK Development's shares fell 15% in 2 hours. The supervisory board is demanding an immediate meeting, and tomorrow morning the tax inspection office wants to talk to you. Oh my God, Mikhail whispered, slumping into his chair. Julian, someone is deliberately trying to destroy me. This is no coincidence. I know, I'm already checking the leads, but for now you have to be careful with every move you make. Don't make any statements without consulting me first. When he hung up, he saw Anna standing in front of his desk. Her eyes were glistening with tears, but her gaze was determined. Mr. Lewandowski, I have to leave immediately. It's the only thing I can do right now. No, Kasia shouted, standing up abruptly. That's exactly what those who organize this want, to drive us apart. Don't you see? Anna turned toward her. Her voice broke. My presence here is destroying everything. The children, his reputation, the company. Maybe the person who revealed this is right. Maybe I should stay away. Before anyone could respond, the doorbell rang throughout the house. Mikhail looked at the security system screen. Ewa Wysoka, their talkative neighbor, was standing at the gate, surrounded by journalists, gesturing and giving an interview. That bitch, Mikhail hissed, turning on the sound from the monitor. I always knew something was wrong. She was talking to the microphones. That Novakoa spent too much time in this house. And Mr. Lewandowski? Well, that's typical of rich people. They think they're untouchable. It's disgusting to take advantage of a poor woman who has lost everything. Liar, Kasia exploded. She's making it all up. But Ewa continued, intoxicated by her own performance. And there's something else. 3 days before the alleged robbery, I saw Anna through the window. She was talking on the phone in the garden. She was very upset. She kept saying something about the right moment and making them pay. Now it all makes sense, doesn't it? Maybe the robbery was just a show to attract attention? The journalists reacted like vultures. Microphones, flashes, questions. Anna looked at the screen and then collapsed into a chair. She hid her face in her hands. It's not true, she whispered. I was talking to my sister. I wanted to tell her that I had finally found a permanent job. That's all. Suddenly there was a loud knock at the front door. Mikhail ran up and opened it. 3 men in gray suits stood on the doorstep. Mr. Mikhail Lewandowski. Yes, we are from the tax inspection office. We have a warrant to search your property. The next few hours were a nightmare. The agents combed through every room, taking computers, documents, and hard drives. Camera flashes flickered in front of the house. Reporters shouted questions over the fence. Everything Mikhail had built throughout his life was collapsing before his eyes. And somewhere on the other side of town, in a black Mercedes parked in the shade, Rafael Kroll was talking on the phone. Everything went according to plan, he said coolly. People took the bait. Now it's time for phase 2. Perfect, replied the voice on the other end. Quiet, elegant, but cold as steel. Make sure Novakoa disappears. This time for real. Meanwhile, the story was taking an increasingly dark turn on social media. Anonymous accounts began publishing conspiracy theories that Mikhail Lewandowski had ordered Mark Novak's disappearance. that Anna was forced to work for him under threat that the twins were in danger. A new hashtag, Dogs Save the Twins, appeared online and hundreds of users began demanding the intervention of social services. Kasia was on the phone with the PR department trying to put out the media fire when suddenly something disturbed her. Uncle, look at these accounts that are posting the worst accusations. They were all created in the last 2 days and are posting with unnatural frequency as if someone were controlling them. Michael came over, looked at the screen, and froze. She was right. The pattern was obvious. The campaign was organized, precise, planned down to the minute. Someone paid for it. He said quietly, "These aren't random people. It's an army of trolls created to destroy me." "But who?" Kasia asked. "Who would have the money and the motive to do this?" The answer came faster than they expected. One of the tax inspection officers entered the office, holding a piece of paper in his hand. "Mr. Lewandowski, we found this in your desk. It's a transfer order for 2 million euros, issued this morning in the name of Rafael Kroll. Can you explain this?" The blood drained from Machau's face. "It's blackmail. Rafael blackmailed me this morning." "Blackmail?" The officer raised an eyebrow. "For what reason?" Before Machau could answer, the phone in his pocket vibrated. Unknown number. He answered instinctively. "Hello." A distorted electronic voice sounded on the other end. "Good evening, Mr. Lewandowski. Are you enjoying your newfound fame?" "Who are you?" Machau growled. "Someone who knows all your secrets. Someone who has been waiting for this moment for a very long time. Rafael was just a pawn, a small piece of a larger puzzle, but the real game is just beginning. What do you want?" "I want to see you fall. I want you to lose everything, your company, your name, the trust of those who are still with you. And when you're left alone, with nothing, then I'll tell you who I am." The connection was cut off. Machau stood motionless, holding the phone as if it had just turned into a piece of ice. He looked at Anna. Their eyes met for a second, full of the same unspoken doubt as to whether they could still trust each other. The former Lewandowski residence, once a symbol of success and luxury, now resembled a prison, its walls beginning to crack. That night, a heavy, stifling silence hung over the villa, interrupted only by the flashes of light from the cameras still standing behind the gate. The search ended only around 10 p.m., leaving the house in chaos and its inhabitants on the verge of collapse. But the real hell was yet to come. At 3 a.m., Michael jumped out of bed when he heard a piercing scream. He ran out of the bedroom and saw Anna in the hallway in a gray bathrobe, with a bottle of milk in her hand, her eyes wide with fear. "Mr. Lewandowski, hurry up. The children have a high fever." They rushed into the twins' room together. Philip and Jakob were lying in their cribs, their faces red, their breathing rapid and shallow. Michael picked up Philip, feeling his little body burning with fever. "I'm calling an ambulance. I already did." Kasia called out, running into the room in her pajamas with the phone in her hand. "They'll be here in 10 minutes. Those 10 minutes lasted an eternity. Anna paced back and forth with Jakob in her arms, humming a lullaby under her breath. Her voice trembled, but it was tender. Michael sat on the edge of the bed, rocking Philip, stroking his feverish forehead, feeling his heart break into pieces. When the paramedics arrived, they acted quickly. The diagnosis was made after a few minutes. Acute emotional stress, which weakened their immunity and caused a fever. At this age, 3-month-olds are particularly susceptible to emotional stress, explained the emergency doctor. "We have to take them to the hospital immediately. Their condition is serious." They were at the children's hospital in Krakow, where the little ones lay connected to small IVs and monitors. Dr. Emil Rogowski, the pediatrician on duty, asked Machau to step aside. "Mr. Lewandowski, I have to be honest with you. These children have been through a huge shock. 3-month-old babies absorb everything. Tension, fear, noise, adult stress. Their bodies react as if the whole world is falling apart." Machau turned pale. "Are you saying it's my fault?" "I'm not accusing you, but as a doctor, I have a duty to report when I see that the home environment is harmful to children. And after what happened, the media, the police, the shouting, please understand that they feel it. In their world, it's war." Michael leaned against the wall with his eyes closed. The doctor was right. In his pursuit of the truth, in his desperate struggle for control, he didn't notice that his children were drowning with him. Anna left the room. Her eyes showed fatigue and concern. They're asleep, she said quietly, but Philip was still sobbing in his sleep. And Jakub? His pulse is irregular. The doctors are monitoring him. These words hit Mikhail like stones. He slumped down onto the cold floor of the corridor. He hid his face in his hands. I have failed as a father, as a man. I can't protect them. Anna sat down next to him, not too close, respectfully. You haven't failed. You're fighting, but maybe you're fighting the wrong enemy. Mikhail looked at her questioningly. What do you mean? That in your pursuit of answers, of blame, of who betrayed you, you forget that the most important thing for them is to feel safe, to know that they are loved, that they will not lose their father the way I lost Marek. Tears glistened in her eyes. I know what it means to live in uncertainty. For years I didn't know if my husband was alive or not, but I was an adult. These children shouldn't have to know such fear. Mako asked quietly, how did you survive it? Anna smiled sadly. I didn't survive. I just learned to live with it. But they can't learn that. They must be protected from it. There was a long silence. The only sound in the hallway was the rhythmic beeping of the monitors from the intensive care unit. Then Mikhail sighed heavily and said in a low, broken voice, I don't know who I can trust anymore. Rafael blackmailed me. Ewa betrayed me. Someone out there is pulling all the strings and directing my ruin like a show. And you? He looked at Anna. You have every reason to hate me. Anna nodded. It's true. I had every reason to hate you. But I saw how you hold those children, how you wake up at night as soon as you hear them breathing on the monitor. I saw your face light up when Philip smiled for the first time. A man who loves his children so much cannot be the monster they want to portray him as. Then Kasia entered the hallway carrying 2 plastic cups of coffee from the vending machine. She sat down opposite her uncle and handed him one. The doctor says the twins will be here for at least 5 days. Maybe longer if their fever doesn't go down. 5 days, Michał repeated, as if the words meant nothing. Uncle, Kasia said firmly, tomorrow you have a meeting with the tax office and the financial guard. You have to deal with the scandal in the company. You can't do it alone. She's right, added Anna. I'll stay here with Philip and Jakub day and night. I won't leave them even for a moment. Michał looked at her closely, searching her eyes for a trace of deceit, but saw only sincere devotion. Why, he asked quietly after everything that had happened. Why do you still want to help? Anna got up and went to the window. Behind the glass, in the soft light of the neon lights, 2 tiny beings slept peacefully, connected to thin IV tubes. Because when I look at these children, I see a chance to save something that I myself have lost. I see an opportunity to stop the tragedy before it destroys another family. For the next 5 days, Anna kept her word. She didn't leave the room for a minute. She slept on a narrow armchair. She hummed lullabies and held the boys' hands when their bodies trembled with fever. Michał appeared between meetings with lawyers and management, always tired, his eyes full of shadows. But every time he opened the door to that room and saw Anna with his children, he felt something soften inside him. Perhaps, just perhaps, she was the only person he could really trust. On the 6th day, when the twins were finally beginning to regain their strength, Kasia rushed into the room, holding a laptop as if it were evidence in a case. Her face was a mixture of triumph and cold rage. I found him. Michał, who was helping Anna give Philip his bottle, put the baby back in her arms and turned around. Who? The one who planned all this? Kasia opened the laptop on the desk. Remember how I said that the accounts that publish lies about you are newly created? I asked a friend from college, an expert in cybersecurity. He found their IP addresses and asked Michał, feeling his heart race. They all lead to one company in Milan, PR Solutions International. Officially, they deal with reputation management, but in reality, they sell smear campaigns. And guess who their newest client is? A scanned contract signed 3 weeks earlier, exactly 1 week before the fake kidnapping, appeared on the screen. The name Rafael Kroll. Michał felt everything boiling inside him. That bastard. Wait, that's not all. Kasia interrupted. Rafael didn't have the money for such an operation. The payment of 300,000 euros came from an account. And when my friend traced the source, guess who it belonged to? To Sergius Ratajczak. There was silence, interrupted only by the rhythmic beeping of the monitors. Anna, holding Philip in her arms, raised her head. Sergius Ratachak, the one you used to work with. Not only worked with, Mako said coldly. He's the man I fired from the company when I found out he was stealing. The same man who used Baltimex to launder money and who disappeared after Marek discovered his scheme. The puzzle was finally starting to come together. Mikhail sat down heavily in his chair, feeling the adrenaline give way to terror. Rudzjak wanted revenge. I accused him publicly. I destroyed his career. Then he found out that Anna was working for me. He realized he could connect these two worlds, her past and my guilt. He arranged everything, the fake kidnapping, the leaks to the media, Rafal's blackmail, the whole charade. But why did he drag Anna into it? Kasia asked. He could have attacked you directly. Anna answered first, her voice full of tears. Because Sergius is a sadist. He wanted to destroy you not only financially but also mentally. He wanted everyone to think that I was guilty, that I, the victim's wife, was taking revenge on you. He wanted me to become a monster. Mikhail stared at the floor. And the children, he whispered, he used my children as pawns. He had them overpowered, tied up, and frightened just to make the story more shocking. Kasia continued scrolling through the documents. That's not all. My IT specialist also intercepted messages between Rafal and someone signed as R. Listen to this. The neighbor's doing a great job. The more she talks, the better. Make sure she gets the second part of her payment. The message was sent on the exact day Ewa gave her interview to the media. So Ewa was also paid. Mikhail growled. Her, Rafal, everyone, yes. And those attackers who broke into the house, Kasia added, they were mercenaries. 3 repeat offenders with convictions for assault. Ratashchak paid them in cash. He gave them the code to the alarm system, which he got from Rafal. They were supposed to stage an attack, tie up Anna and the children, give them a sedative, leave a mess and disappear. They weren't supposed to steal anything, just spread fear. Anna covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide open. So it was all a lie. This whole nightmare wasn't for you, Mikhail replied, looking at her seriously. For you, it was real. Your fear, your bruises, your tears. He gave you all of that, knowing that no one would believe you. Another silence fell, thick as smoke after an explosion. But why did he wait 2 months, Anna asked. He could have struck earlier. Mikhail looked out the window where dawn was just beginning to paint a cool light over Krakow. Bora Tychak is a perfectionist. He waited until everyone let their guard down, until we began to trust each other, until he could destroy everything with a single move. Darling, said the man standing in the doorway quietly. His voice trembled as if he had long forgotten how to say the word. Anna froze. For a moment, the world ceased to exist. No sounds, no lights, just him. The same smile, though now hidden under a shadow of fatigue. The same eyes she had dreamed of every night for 3 years. Marek, she whispered, grabbing the door frame because her legs refused to obey her. Marek came closer, slowly, uncertainly, as if afraid that his touch would shatter the dream. I was afraid you wouldn't recognize me. Anna laughed through her tears. I don't recognize a world without you. They fell into each other's arms, not like characters in a romance, but like castaways who had finally found shore. Their hands trembled, their hearts beat unevenly, and tears mixed with laughter. Mikhail's voice came from the living room. Come on. He stood at the entrance, and next to him was Kasia with a camera in her hand. She wanted to capture the moment, but Mikhail shook his head. No, this is their moment. Anna moved away from Marek. She touched his cheek as if to make sure it wasn't an illusion. Why? Because Sergius told me to disappear. He threatened to kill you. I saw his men. I knew he was capable of anything. I ran away to save you. But every day I regretted letting you think he was dead. Anna pressed her hands to her mouth, stifling her sobs. Mikhail, standing to the side, felt something loosen in his chest. For the first time in months, he felt no burden of guilt, only quiet relief. Marek, he said gently, your wife is stronger than any of us thought. Thanks to her, my sons are alive. Thanks to her, so am I. Marek nodded. I know. I saw it. And I came not only to get her back, but also to thank her. Anna turned to Mikhail. There was gratitude in her eyes and something else she couldn't name. I don't know how to thank you. You don't have to. Mikhail smiled slightly. Sometimes it's enough to know that the story has a happy ending. A few weeks later, the villa's garden was filled with the sound of children's laughter. Philip and Jakub were crawling on the grass, chasing colorful balls. Anna and Marek were sitting next to them on a bench, holding hands, quietly, calmly, as if they were afraid of scaring away their happiness. Mikhail stood by the terrace with a cup of coffee, watching them. Kasia approached him and nudged him lightly with her elbow. Look at them. They're like something out of a fairy tale. He admitted it. Sometimes life writes fairy tales, but you have to live through the worst chapters to get to the end. Kasia smiled and then pointed to the twins. What about you? Mikhail looked at the garden, where the sun was shining through the branches of old trees. I'm starting over. The smell of freshly baked cookies wafted into the house. Vanilla and chocolate. The same smell that once meant chaos, but now meant peace. The villa, once full of shadows, was finally breathing light. And although the past had left scars on all of them, one thing was certain. It is not always wealth that makes a person powerful. Sometimes it is love, forgiveness, and the courage to start over. Anna threw herself into his arms with a cry that was both laughter and tears. They hugged with the desperation of two people who had long believed they had lost each other forever. In the weeks that followed, the Lewandowski villa underwent another transformation. Marek and Anna moved into a small guest house on the estate, a place that Mikhail had renovated especially for them, not as employees, but as family. I can't accept this, Anna protested. You saved my children, Mikhail interrupted her. You loved them when I was too lost in pain to feel anything. It's not pity, Anna. It's gratitude. Thanks to his financial experience, Marek started working for Mikhail's company. His knowledge proved invaluable in rebuilding control and transparency systems in the companies. One evening, as the four of them ate dinner on the terrace and the twins slept peacefully in their double stroller, Marek smiled slightly. It's ironic, he said quietly. Sergius wanted to destroy us all, and in the end, he brought us together. Evil never really wins, Mikhail replied. In the end, the truth always prevails. Anna looked at her husband, then at Mikhail, and finally at the sleeping boys. I never thought I would find happiness here. Kasia approached the table, holding a cup of tea in her hand. Uncle, can I take care of the twins this weekend? I'd like Anna and Marek to have some time to themselves. Mikhail looked at his children, then at Anna and Marek. He smiled. Forever is a very long word. He paused, then added gently, but I think it's worth a try. And as the sun set over Krakow, the Lewandowski villa finally became what it should always have been, a home full of love, peace, and forgiveness. Sergius Ratajczak was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Rafael Kroll received 8 years, and Ewa Wisaka received a 2-year suspended sentence. But for Mikhail, Anna, Marek, and the twins, true justice was not the imprisonment of their enemies, but the rebuilding of what had been broken, because the truth set them all free. So in the villa that was almost destroyed by revenge, the truth prevailed. Anna proved that her loyalty was genuine. Marek returned, and Mikhail understood that judging people by appearances can cost you everything. If this story touched your heart, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell. Share it with someone who believes in the power of truth. Write in the comments if you would believe Anna. Your opinion really matters. M.